Such a jaunty little melody. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Seth Hurst in Los Angeles.
And I'm Alison Norrington in London, and welcome to the Story Hour.
The Story Hour sits at the intersection of storytelling and technology. We bring you the story behind the stories, how it's written, how it's produced, how it's distributed, and even the personal stories behind the storytellers themselves.
We talk with the master writers, producers, directors, authors, and technologists, covering it all from film and television to literature, virtual and augmented reality, and more, as well as the innovations in production, technology, and distribution that are changing the how of storytelling.
Our guest today is
Da, da, da.
us.
You know
Hello,
what, Brian?
Alison. Well, we just thought we'd start out and do a little something something during the pandemic.
No, right?
And
A
what
year
have we
ago,
got?
I tell you, it's crazy. It was April last year, 2020, that we had a chat and we decided that it would be fun for us as well, probably as much as anyone else, to get together every week and talk about storytelling, talk about how things are changing. And yeah, like we're episode 30 and we've decided to wrap this up as season one.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was your idea to do seasons because we had so many episodes. I can remember saying to you, Allison, we need at least 5 episodes in the can before we launch because this is a real commitment. Because as you know, I do the Happenstance Chef and I have to do 4 episodes in a day, and it's just a huge
Hmm.
commitment. But I
Of course.
remember us saying back and forth, my God, we know so many people, so many of our friends, we are all storytellers, but there are so many different ways to tell the story. And I can remember you and I talking about, well, it isn't the what of the storytelling that changes, it's the how.
And
So
we've been saying that for such a long time, right?
I
I mean,
know.
we've been
And
around the world together, Brian, talking about storytelling on various stages and labs, and that's always the through line, that it's
yes, I,
not
I, I
what.
know that because not too long ago, our friend anniversary came up on Facebook. And I thought, oh my God, remember we used to joke that people would think we were married because
We
we
used to
should
show
pull up that
photos of
picture
planes.
because we were everywhere in the world together and we looked so, in my opinion, dapper and dashing in Monaco when we met the prince. So I
We
mean, we
did.
literally have been amongst royalty, but what we decided was the royalty of storytellers, and that's who we were going to interview. And when we say we've covered it all, I mean, we really haven't gotten deep into immersive yet. We sort of have, but we haven't even gotten into virtual reality. And I was looking at a video of you trying virtual reality for the first time and going, this is fantastic. I love to imitate you.
I
So,
look so bad in that video. That's the trouble with virtual reality, right? It's fun when you're in the headset, but you do look a bit ridiculous.
but it's interesting because there's even innovation there. And, we both have come from book writing and traditional television and playwriting. And I notice, and even now, because as an extension of what we're doing, we do a clubhouse every Thursday at noon Pacific and 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and we have different topics of storytelling on there and things that are relevant. And when we do that, I think, my God, between the two of us, there is this wealth of experience. I don't know if it's a wealth of knowledge because we're constantly learning from our guests. And
We
we're
are.
and as a matter of fact, just before we filmed today, I had said to you, "Ooh, the ETC Center at USC has a new white paper out on modeling characters in AI." And I
Yeah.
think Edward Saatchi is part of it, and Guy Gadney, and we're like, "Oh, that we should talk about that."
Of
So
course. I mean, these are all people that we know, right? We're so lucky that we've got access in our friendship groups to these brilliant people at the like pioneering actually sometimes at the forefront of storytelling.
but I think, Allison, you always choose topics that will interest you.
Hmm.
And the topics that we decide to do, it's like, I think you have this natural curiosity, always wanting to learn more and always wanting, you teach as well. So you
Hmm.
always want to support other people in
Hmm.
learning more. And I think that translates into what we've done. And I think, I don't want to break my arm patting ourselves on the back, but we have gotten better at this over time. When we
Right.
started, thank God Katrina Wood is a friend because she was our very first episode and we were doing the absolute best we could and, flying by the seat of our pants. And she was so gracious and just from media exchange, she's worked with showrunners all like 35 years in business of bringing showrunners back and forth, and how relevant that's become to some of our other discussions. So it does seem like one leads into the next.
It
One
does.
discussion just builds upon another.
But I think as well, Brian, there's such a lot of books out there on storytelling and experience design and virtual reality and everything pretty much, every way you could skin anything to do with storytelling. But you and I like the fact that we don't come from a theoretical perspective. Like, and I've always felt that, we both have one foot in the camp of understanding the theory. We read a lot of papers, we do read a lot of books, we learn as we go. But then there's also another foot firmly in the camp of a practitioner. Like, we've both got our battle scars. I mean, we talked on Clubhouse the other day about receiving and giving notes, and we've both got our battle scars from sometimes from people that weren't even qualified to give notes, and there is a certain sense of hierarchy in the industry, which I know some people coming into it don't get and don't understand and don't figure really why it has to be that way because they know their stuff. But there is something that comes from learned experience. And
But
both of us,
don't you think that hierarchy has been a little bit upset from the
100,
democratization of media? I mean, we had a whole clubhouse, and we haven't had them on the story hour yet. It's amazing how they're both complementary. But remember, we did a whole clubhouse on storytelling for TikTok, and
yeah.
completely innovative, complete disruptor to the system and the hierarchy. So
But
maybe is there this balance, you think,
I
between
think I think COVID has exacerbated that and accelerated that. Like, I really think the situation now, and I think I've said it before already, that there's a leveling of the playing field. And I think there's really great storytellers that probably could have waited years or would have had to wait for years even to be seen, who are moving more quickly. Like, we're now used to seeing a very low production, like value of production. We're watching, newscasters Skyping in and zooming in, and we're watching people shoot stuff on their phones. And I know there's even now like film festivals for films shot on phones. So the whole thing has leveled out. And what's happened with COVID, for how terrible it's all been for the last year, there is a leveling. And I think it's really interesting and exciting as to where things are going to go. We're going to see a shift, I'm sure.
like, but I do think, I mean, you look at, I mean, gosh, Marvel and Disney Plus, they can spend a fortune. But you look at these things that are cinematic for television. The Queen's Gambit, another example, just beautifully shot, and you know,
Absolutely.
people ran out and bought bigger televisions, and they made room for home theater. And
Hmm.
when you start to think of that, the competition for eyeballs, like I think in this country, cable, I mean, what the heck? You know,
Hmm.
Discovery Plus, which you would subscribe to Discovery, you would subscribe to cable to get Discovery. Now you can have the stream. You can stream anything to your television set. So the whole landscape has changed. But it's like going top down and bottom up at the same time,
Yep.
because you have TikTok. It reminds me of a little bit what happened with YouTube. And
Hmm.
but it is the thing that's different, I think, is, we say like TikTok, there is an enormous commitment to output. I mean,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
literally have to wake up and decide what you're going to do that day. You are at the mercy of
Yeah.
your fans, of your audience. Whereas if you're producing television or a series or a movie, there is more time for higher production values. So there's all these different, and we haven't even talked about immersive entertainment, location based entertainment. There are all these different levels of story.
Hmm. But
And
it's
to me, there is that continuum. There is the sit back and watch, which
right.
is now I mean, there is some golden age of streaming that they're going to talk about someday, like they talked about the golden age of television. You can
Right.
sit back and watch, or you can immerse yourself halfway and have agency. Or
Hmm.
now, with what I just read from ETC today, you can become part of the story, and the characters are AI, and they will actually respond to you being cast in the story.
And that goes to, it's not the what that's changed, right? Being part of a story, we go back to vaudeville and we go back to theatre and we go back to role play. that's been there for a long time. And this sense of this sit back and this passive voyeur element, and then this idea of leaning in and being a little bit more immersed, that's been going for like centuries. Court jesters and Henry VIII and however far back you want to go, probably even before then. It's not the what that's changed, it's the how. And we've had conversations before about technology, and we've been asked questions about technology changing storytelling. And that's a huge debate. And I think what, for me at least, it comes down to the experience and an expectation. Like I can lay in bed at night in the dark and scroll through TikTok and literally lose 2 hours watching stuff I didn't even know I wanted to see, right? Now, if I was going into a cinema or a theater to watch something, that's not what I want. I want to be in the moment. I want the big screen. I want the surround sound. So for me, it's very much bringing together the storytelling, the narrative design, the experience design, the emotional design, all crystallizing together. And technologies are going to come and go. But if we can understand and remember that we're telling stories for people and we know how we want them to feel at the end of it, with that as kind of the baseline, I'm really, really always excited to see where we can take it.
While you're talking about this, I'm imagining a visual, and it's
Mm.
not a 2D visual, because in the 2D visual you'd have a circle and there's levels of immersion, and there's TikTok over here and traditional television over here. But now I see it as a three-dimensional globe,
Right.
where little lines are going from one side of the globe through to the
I know.
other, where each of these initiatives informs the other.
Of
Um,
course.
One thing that I find really interesting is the typical path of disruption, which is, and I'm not mentioning any names. So we proposed a programming for a certain group um, that really was innovative, and
Hmm.
the group was just too afraid to take the risk. But what I'm
Right.
starting to realize right now is that when you think you have a lot to lose, and this has been true all along, it's just really present with technology. When you think you have a lot to lose, of course you're going to be less inclined to try something new, unless that is your nature, which is, okay, let me jump forward. I mean, both of us have done that. I mean, I abandoned the world of television to jump into VR, and very happy that I did. And now noticing um, that the innovation is not happening in Hollywood for VR, it's actually happening in enterprise,
Hmm.
in medicine, in architecture, in training, and it's very interesting to me that all those disciplines also require storytelling.
Of
Like,
course. Yeah.
even if you're an enterprise, you still need storytelling. And this was the point that we were trying to make in this
Hmm.
programming, which is, well, you've got a whole bunch of storytellers over here, you have a whole bunch of enterprise people over here with something to accomplish. When you teach people and they become part of the story, they have better recall, better memory, all of that.
Hmm.
But if you're just teaching them and you're throwing things at them and they're not seeing themselves in a story, then the training is lacking something.
Right. Absolutely.
So this idea of storytellers in new technologies that might be tried out in enterprise first, or augmented reality.
Hmm.
When I worked with Tim Kring years ago on Conspiracy for Good, that was all augmented reality using London as
Hmm.
a character, more or less, in the story, and a playing board at the same time. That was
Yeah.
2010.
It's
And
crazy.
we
Like,
really haven't
yeah.
kind of, that still hasn't taken off. But that idea that people are going to be out and about now and they want to make more of the reality that they're in.
Right. But there's a sense as well of like when you say about being fearful about return on investment, right? And I remember speaking to Mike Manello years ago, and we had a really interesting conversation about measurements of success. And it actually has ended up being a question that I ask quite early on when I work with any new client is what does success look like? Because if it's the Nielsen ratings or if it's the top 10 bestseller of your novel, like I need to know what does success look like. I've worked with clients that have wanted a small, engaged, loyal audience for a long duration of time, maybe even up to a year, because they're working towards a different goal that isn't just a high, huge volume of numbers for maybe a week or so and then it's gone away. So this idea of measuring success, and I think that some of that fearfulness comes from traditional measurements of success. So you say like conspiracy for good, And I've also worked with clients that want things like that to happen, but they find it difficult to actually validate the spend. I mean, especially
Hmm.
if you're dealing with social media and there isn't actually a revenue stream necessarily that comes immediately from that. So there's this disparity and there's this imbalance. And I always tell a story of a fantastic documentary filmmaker that I worked with in Sweden. And she'd worked with her subject, who was a drug addict, for 10 years and created this amazing documentary. And I came in to help her get it to market and pull out some elements for her that were very engaging experientially. And I sat down with her and I said, okay, so like, who's your audience for the documentary? And she said, oh, I know who it is. I want 5 people to see this. I'm like, 5 people? You've worked on this for 10 years. She went, oh, yeah, but I know who the 5 people are. And she was like policy reform, jails, schools. She knew exactly the ministers in government that she wanted to see her documentary, and there were 5 of them. And I loved the fact that she actually got that to happen. But that's also for me a key question. Like there is disruption, but is there a focus? Like where are we going with it? I think it's a big element.
I don't have an answer to that because what disruption does it also disrupts business models. And
Right.
if investors cannot see, and I'm not talking about content investment as much as I'm talking about technology investment and then content. Like if you're investing in a technology and there's no content that goes on, it's like 3D television. There wasn't a lot of content. It required an entire workflow dedicated to 3D for
Yeah.
television, and plus what people had to put on to see it. So as much as it would have been a great idea, and
Yeah.
of course yours truly had to buy a 3D television.
Of course you did.
Of
And
course.
everything else. You got every headset, haven't you, right now?
Yeah. Well, I've had that problem since I was a child, and I probably should get into a 12-step program for technology acquisition. But that whole thing about where is the money, not just a measure of success. Alison, it's funny. We're at this place with our own program right now, with the story hour, where we're
Hmm.
like, you know what? We have really good content. We
Hmm.
really haven't pushed it. We really haven't promoted it. And now
Yeah.
you and I are looking at each other and we're going, you know what? This is content that people need to see. And
Hmm.
our next step is okay, now we have a great story, which to me, the great story is the first success. That's the first measure of success because you
Yeah.
haven't got that. And as I told you the other day, really interesting. I've been working with an author now for a year on a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. And we're at that next step. So all we did was focus on the book. We focused on make sure that there was a great story there and a great experience for the reader. And
Yeah.
like us, she is at that next place now
Yeah.
where actually, to be completely honest, my expertise is
Hmm.
no longer required or doesn't hit that level
Yeah.
because I've had books published, but how does she see it? And I can make suggestions and stuff, but at that place
Yeah.
where now you've got a great story, and that is what we have been talking about the entire time on the story hour, is what it
Yes.
takes to get a
Yeah.
great story. And then we've talked about distribution second. And so that measure of success, distribution, well, you want to reach the entire world. Well, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is why, we've had Maura Dunbar on. We've yet to have her on the story hour. We've got a list of guests now of people
Yeah.
that we have to have on the story hour.
Right.
But when Maura, who's a very, very experienced producer, talks, and she and I talk often because she's been like a mentor. So I
Hmm.
have actually called her from the set to say, I've got a
Hmm.
problem. Here's how I'm going to solve it. What do you think? Um, but she will say, we're actually now have to look at casting this person because they have a really large following.
Right.
And is it the actress that you really want for the part? Maybe not. But they have a bigger following than so or so. So
Right.
we had this discussion, and she said, "Here's the thing: I don't know that this person will actually be able to do a flat Midwest accent because they never have,
Okay.
and their accent is not appropriate for the story. And yet, they've got
Right.
millions and millions of followers.
Right.
So
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
interesting, right down to the casting, about making choices by
Yeah.
what's successful. And I have to tell you, to me, it's just, there's something that offends me about that. And it's like, and
Yeah,
we're also going to have David Katz on in the future to talk about
of course.
AI in storytelling. And you'll
Yeah.
remember in our conversation last week, as we were sort of feeling this out, I was like, and you were like, tell us more. And I was like, no,
Oh, I know,
because
I
I'm
can
one of
see
those
you're so
people who's
resistant.
firmly entrenched and wants to control the vision of the story. I don't want
Yeah.
some AI writing the story. Of course, that's
No,
immediately where I went, which is
but
exactly what we're talking
I'm
about when
interested in
criticizing
that.
others. And he's like, well, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, but that's
No,
what I'm getting. So
I know.
immediate shutdown for
Yes, you
me. And
did.
I'm like an innovator. So
Yeah,
very
I
just,
get that though, but I'm interested in that conversation because I think there's levels of that. Like it's like with anything, right? If you're going to blindly follow what is on the screen of your phone and not lift your head up and look throughout the day and make decisions for yourself, you will turn into a robot, right? And I feel there's something in what Dave Katz was saying about this idea of AI and storytelling. I want to see where I feel the level is that I'm suddenly
well,
uncomfortable.
when we
So
have him on, I'll be the bad cop.
I know you will. And
So,
I'll be the little kid who's curious about everything.
you know how every once in a while we're doing an interview, something brilliant will come out of our guest or up from our guest. And when
Yeah,
Sarah Hill was on,
yes.
she talked about the physiology of storytelling, which I was like, that's absolutely true. Whether you're in
Yeah,
virtual reality or not, there is a
yes,
physiological effect, whether
yes.
you're reading a book and you can't put it down, or your heart is in your hand or in your throat, or you forgot to breathe, that there is this physiology of storytelling, or you cry.
And that's
And
the magic of storytelling,
I
right?
never considered that phrase before in my entire writing
Yeah.
existence.
But
And
that's what it's all
here
about.
our
That's
guest
the
comes and
heart of,
says, well, there's a physiology of storytelling.
yeah,
And her interview was brilliant about using
yes.
VR for calming yourself down and biofeedback and being able to respond to circumstances better. And it was right along the lines of, I've been working on this prison project for people
Yeah.
who are incarcerated to adjust to the environment before they are released, and to recognize what triggers are there and to begin to work with those triggers. So there's a story that they get involved in
Of course.
that pulls those triggers. It's just, this is why I love storytelling. I love words, and I love you.
But you know, I also feel like we could never live enough years to experience all the things that we would like to experience. And I think that to be able to do that through storytelling, it feels very passive sometimes sitting back and watching a movie, but we're thinking the whole time, like, would I have done that? And we don't even think of it consciously, but we measure ourselves unconsciously or subconsciously against scenarios and characters and I don't think it's ever going to be something I'm bored of because when you get it right, or not necessarily I get it right, but when the storyteller gets it right and that magic moment you've just spoke about, that is absolute gold dust.
So
And we've
I
had some,
just saw, and it keeps cycling back. So,
yeah,
I'm moving residences after 27 years. So going through the DVD collection and literally letting go, because I know I will not watch something again, but I'm holding on to the hard copy for the memory of how good it was.
yeah,
And I have a couple of really favorite. I mean, Exodus is one of my favorite movies of all time, so of course I'm holding on to that movie. I
hmm
might have changed the ending a little bit, but every producer thinks about how they would have done it differently.
of course.
But you look at just the volume of stories and books on my shelves that people gave me because they thought I would love the story that I never had a chance to read.
Right.
And now the volume of hours and hours of content that's being created. And
Yeah.
yesterday I had this thought. I was like, I kind of get why J.D. Salinger sort of just became a recluse, because there's so much information and so much input that you get from the world every day. And fortunately or unfortunately, we're part of it, but You have to be able to weigh and take what you're going to take, and how much TikTok you're going to watch, and whether you're going to
Hmm.
participate in Facebook, and what is the effect of long-term participation in different social media things. And I think about these things, but
Right.
time is so precious. But to me, there is always room for great story. Like the Marvel universe, I have to get into that universe every time something comes up. I just completely, turn with big TV now, turn off the lights. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is like, oh, what's next? What's next? We watched WandaVision with that. But something like the Queen's Gambit, and usually, and I think this is something that might be happening too. You must capture someone's attention much faster
Hmm.
in a story. So if I'm watching something and the first 7 minutes doesn't capture my imagination, I'm off
Right.
onto the next thing.
Right. And
Like,
7 minutes is generous, I would say.
well, they just canceled Rebel, which was a new series here with Katie Seagal, and the fans were furious that were watching it, but it wasn't catching on.
Yeah.
And so rather than the network waiting for it to catch on, which they might have done in the past, it's like, nope,
Hmm.
on to the next thing. Because
Right.
now we're competing with all of these services. And
Yeah.
so you must capture the imagination of the storyteller, of the audience as a storyteller, much faster than you did. And now there's
Right.
another series that looks to me to be almost exactly like Heroes, Tim Kring's Heroes, but with a slight twist. And it's
Okay.
like, I I'm probably, it could be very, very good. I'll give it a few minutes. I'll see what happens in those opening
Mhm.
minutes. But I've seen Heroes, the first two seasons, and it's still in the memory, and I love those
Yeah.
first two seasons. But
Yeah.
do I want to watch another one of those? How much super? So it's just, as a writer, when I'm thinking, I am thinking that I need to respect people's time.
Yes. Yes. But you know, I would say to that, my spin on that is everything's been done before, right? Any story structure, I mean, you only got to read something like, I don't know, Joseph Campbell or Christopher Booker or all of these. Pretty much everything has been done before. So the skill, I would say, is how to punch it up. How do you twist it? How do you flip it?
Well, and if it's been done before, it's like, and you, I love not knowing what's coming next.
Yeah.
It is the most exciting thing for me. Or I'm so wrapped up in the story that I've lost all time. I don't know what's coming next, or maybe I do, but the writing is so good and the story is so
Yeah.
good and the cinematographer, all the elements that go in above and below the line are just so good that my attention is completely wrapped. And before I
Yeah.
know it, it's 2 in the morning and I've watched this. And I am now in this period where I allow 1 to 2 times a week where I'm actually watching a classic movie,
Oh,
um,
lovely.
in black and white,
Oh,
because
nice.
I want to learn something. And I've noticed that yes, the pacing of modern movies have changed,
Of
but
course, yeah.
somehow in film noir, that pacing still holds up that they have there. And I'm not in a hurry for them to get to the next thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I want
That's
to
lovely.
ask you some questions. I think we have the opportunity to interview each other. We're not going to break the segment.
Okay.
Someday we'll do behind the scenes because,
Oh,
and I'm
doesn't
shaking the
matter.
camera right now so I can get, you're seeing behind the scenes, we're getting all uncomfortable and stuff, but um, I use a program called Ecamm,
Hmm.
and you can see from episode to episode, yours truly is the director. And a lot of times I focus on Alison and the guest when I think Alison will have a great next question, and I get myself off the screen. You will notice I'm never focused on just me and the guest. And
That's true.
confessions to make, Alison. I know sometimes you are so good at the questions, and because I can hear what you're doing from the restroom, a lot of times when I'm off camera, I mute and I'll run to the restroom or I'll get a beverage. So I apologize for that.
Do this.
But but I'm in the control room, so I'm choosing the camera angles and
That is
stuff,
so
and
funny.
and just a personal note. I really hope that in season 2 you get that camera that you bought
Oh,
installed,
please. Well, there will be some changes in season two. We've
such
got a little
as.
bit of rebrand, which will be great. Yes, I will have a better camera. I had struggled so much. I bought the camera, I downloaded the software, nothing was working like it should. And I know, Brian, you tried to help me. You must have thought I was a complete idiot. I even had someone round to help me, and they couldn't figure it out either. I don't know what was going on. But I have promised that I will have a better camera for season 2 to go with our new polished rebrand.
Talk
So
about the rebrand.
the rebrand, we're just going a little bit more glossy. I've kind of been testing out this new look on our last couple of videos that we posted on our YouTube channel. And we're just punching it up a little bit, like I said about what you need to do if something's been done
Yeah, I'm
before.
thinking about punching up production design as well, but it's
Yep.
such a challenge sometimes because our guests, we never know what sound they're going to have
Right.
or how good their camera is going to be and where their head is going to be, and there's only so many adjustments that I can make on this side. Being a non-professional, I am not a technical director, and as you'll remember, I went to school to learn this program. I took
You
a
did.
course to
You
learn this
did.
program. Um, but we're not going to dump our jaunty little opening tune, are we?
We are not dumping the jaunty little opening tune at all. And of course, my bad camera is alleviated if you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because then you can only hear us and not see us.
So I think, so what I wanted to ask you is, you're fascinated by all mediums of storytelling, and you
Hmm.
actually teach a lot of those mediums. And I know
Hmm.
sometimes one chooses the medium that they're going to use to tell the story by the story that they're going to tell. Like, this would be
Hmm.
better as a book, this would be better as a play. But
Yes.
do you have a favorite storytelling medium in which to ply your craft?
That's really a good question. Honestly, I probably I probably would say theme parks.
You say what?
I love theme park.
Theme parks. Oh my gosh. Who
I
our
love it.
guest, our theme park guest? Uh, I'm blanking.
Super 78, Dina Benadon.
It was Dina, but it was also our guest whose home was the theme park.
Oh my goodness, the lovely Denise Chapman Weston.
Denise Chapman. I mean, both those episodes, but Denise giving us a tour of her theme park house.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that is true immersion, isn't it?
Yes, I've been to Denise's house, and I mean it's
No, but I mean a theme park, not just Denise's house.
yeah, but I mean she works in theme parks, but for me a theme park is you create a story world, you understand the pacing of the experience, especially with Disney, you can never see outside of the theme park when you're in Disney. They completely immerse you, which is why they don't want VR in they don't want people in headsets in Disney. But I love it because you craft
Is
an
that true?
experience. Yeah, yeah. You craft an experience in parallel with a story, and there's the steps, like there's the onboarding, there's the like the equivalent of the establishing shot, there's the onboarding, there's the stepping into the immersion, all story driven and guided. And it's also, when it's done right, an attack on the senses, right? What you're seeing, what you're hearing, changes of temperature. Sometimes there's smells that you can smell to add that evocative nature. So for me, honestly, I would say theme park for me is the absolute holistic real deal, because you're bringing in all of the elements I love of storytelling. Sometimes it's orally, sometimes you're looking at something on a screen, there's elements of interactivity. So yeah, not that I get the chance to do that very much, of course, but for me, I love the storytelling within a theme park. What about you? What's your favorite?
I think I have two. Um, I am in love with words. I love the written word. So
Hmm.
writing a book or even writing an article, if I write an article, the opportunity to choose my words and to know that I have this theory that words have a frequency, that they
Hmm.
have a vibration.
Hmm.
And so I always choose my words carefully. I think the highest compliment I ever received was actually from Holland Taylor, actress, on a script that I had written, where she said, no other character could say the line except the character that it was written for.
That's perfect.
And I thought that's why I love the written word,
Yeah.
whether it comes out as a book or a play or whatnot. I just love the written word. And the
Hmm.
second is, I really do have a love of virtual reality.
Yeah.
Um, I think that love was evident with my brother's keeper.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fantastic.
and I, you know, for what I knew and what I dreamed that could be and what I saw in my head, I was so fortunate to be able to bring the filmmakers to the table, Connor Hare and Alex Meter, that could make that vision real and make that vision their own as well. And I
Mhm.
just think there's such opportunity, and the reason I like it is because you are shut off from the outside world.
Mhm.
You can't be on your phone and distracted. You know, Disney can give you, or Universal. I love the Harry Potter ride. You know,
Mhm.
but while you're waiting in line, you're going to be on your phone. You know, but when you get immersed in virtual reality, um, there is nothing to distract you except what you're in. And if it's really good, you don't notice the time that's gone by because the story is so compelling.
Right, yes. And you know what? Like there are design elements from my brother's keeper that to this day I use as best practice when I'm
Thank you.
talking to storytellers and experienced designers. Some
You know,
really cool
I
stuff
hate
done.
to make it sound this way. I've seen a lot of VR. You know, we curate for the Vancouver International Film Festival. I see a lot of VR. And as far as cinematic VR, and I'm not
Hmm.
talking interactive, I'm just talking cinematic storytelling, I really haven't seen anything that I think I think I saw one thing where I had to call the creator and say, "You top my brother's keeper," and I don't mind telling you, you have,
Oh, nice.
because it was just brilliant. But
Yeah,
you know, those guys did such a Connor and Alex did such an amazing job, and we had such a great team. I haven't seen anything that equals that really, but I do think that
sure.
that could be a future, that there can be cinematic VR. It's just there's not enough headsets in the field yet to make it worth it. When you talk about your measures of success, you've
Right.
watched Google get in and out. You watched so Daydream is done. You've watched camera companies get in and out,
Hmm.
like John, and John was the camera that we used to do slow motion.
Hmm.
Um, you've watched HTC shift entirely over to enterprise and gaming
Yes.
away
Yes.
from cinematic. So cinematic will be there one day.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the timing, but I just
But
think
you know
that
what?
it's every storyteller's dream to have someone so immersed in their story that they're that you brought them into the world and they've left the world they're in and they've come
Right.
into your world.
But you know what? Like my brother's keeper was, I don't know if it was 9 or 13 minutes long. It was about that, if I remember rightly. And my belief is you were very clear how you wanted people to feel at the end of that. Most people took off the headset and cried. There was a clear narrative arc. You blended nicely, almost like a long distance shot where we were establishing where we were in terms of place, with what Martin Percy, who is one of our guests, calls the intimate drama zone, the IDZ, which is he would claim is pretty much the length of your arm, right? So depending on how you wanted people to feel as they go through that narrative arc of My Brother's Keeper, was whether they have the opportunity to look from a distance or whether they then are put right into the middle of the action in the intimate drama zone. So there's tons of stuff. You and me could do a whole session on what I felt was so good about My Brother's Keeper.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that it was done in 2017. It was released in 2017 and with HTC at Sundance,
Yeah.
and that it still holds up. Like maybe every 6 months or so, I'll give it a look,
Yeah, right.
and I'll
Yes.
just watch. And there's only one thing I would change, and I'm not even going to say what it was, but there's only
Okay.
one thing I would change because you pick your battles,
Of
and
course.
this was the one thing I couldn't. I just said okay, fine. Um, but it stands up, and it
Yeah.
stands up because not just because of its cinematic techniques, which I cannot take credit for,
Hmm.
but it stands up because of its story.
Exactly. And that's what we're all about on the story hour.
So,
And we've had,
Allison, I know I keep feeding names to you. Do you have the
yeah,
list of our guests that we may have in season two handy, or are we just going to
I
have to wait?
do have some of them here. We've got a pretty nice list. So who we've already had? We've had Katrina Wood, we've had Will Brenton, had Super 78, we had the lovely DMA, Bernie
Ah,
Sue.
DMA. That session was so inspiring because she was there. I mean, she told her story, but how she supports storytellers is amazing.
Yep.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, Paul, we had Netflix Stranger Things showrunner Carl at Guidasec. We had Alon Lee. We had Stornoway. We had Martin Percy, Juliana Lowe, Helen Situ,
Ah,
Noah
Juliana, that
Nelson.
was great because that was, I mean, they were all great, But here we were actually talking about tilt brush, animation, immersive storytelling, and art, and that was something I'd never explored. So that was wonderful.
And then Helen was talking about TikTok storytelling. Noah Nelson was talking about pretty much everything immersive. Denise Chapman Weston walked us through a theme park experience of her home. Jason Zada, brilliant pioneer of interactive storytelling. And we finish our season with Brian Bihar. And that pretty much wraps
And
us
Sarah
up.
Hill, we had Sarah Hill as well.
Sarah Hill is the first person for our season 2.
Oh, I gave it away.
You did,
I
but
gave
I
it
tell you one thing,
away.
it's worth watching because she talks about helium, which is HEALIUM. And we have Kate McCallum talking about 360 domes and immersive. We have Bjarke Pedersen and Johanna Koljonen, who talk a lot about interactive and immersive and role play and LARPing. We have Eliza Jappanen, who's talking about animation. We literally have a list where I think
We
we'll pretty
have
much
we
be
have
through it.
Sabra Williams and possibly
Yes.
Gina Belafonte, who's our partner in how they teach writing and theater inside of prisons. Um, I'm going to ask my old friend Tim Kring.
Yeah, I
I'm
really need to have
hoping.
Tim on. Tim was so good on Clubhouse with us.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. And I know we want Deborah Lowe's offer because we're going to be talking about playwriting, and we just keep making this list. I think we have enough for like 5 years.
Yeah, we do. I mean, I think I'd say we're pretty much 2/3 of the way through season 2 in terms of our lineup. But I would also love to say I'm always open to suggestions. So if anybody who's watching this or listening to this has someone they'd like to recommend,
Oh, and
we are,
Catherine Clinch. We're having Catherine
of
Clinch.
course, I'm in love with Catherine Clinch.
Like an incredibly experienced showrunner that shoots from the hip. Has got lots of great guidance.
But all I'm saying is heart to heart. That was that. I thought I was going to be Jennifer Hart when I grew up.
Jake and the
That's what
Fat
I'm saying.
Man. I mean, it's great. So it's interesting because we have the innovators, the people that are just coming onto the scene, like Juliana, who are really finding and disrupting. And then we have Catherine, who's been in the industry and watched so many changes and actually teaches people in the industry how to use social media
Yes,
now.
yes, yes.
So, as a matter of fact, we have a session coming up with her so that we can learn how to use it and hire the right person to promote us. Alison
Well,
Norrington, I can't even remember how we met. How did we meet?
I think we met, I want to say 2009, but I don't know how. I
Isn't
know
that?
I already knew you before Story World, which was 2010, but I don't know how. And
Well,
I
we're
don't
not going
know.
to have any stories to tell our grandchildren.
We can make them up because that's what good storytellers do.
I pull Allison's chain all the time. I do this little character where I imitate her called Penelope Kisses, like, hello, darling. And so we're always in a good mood whenever, just before we start the show, because Allison and I get on with each other first and we joke around a lot.
And there's a
Um,
lot of really hilarious and really bad outtakes. And maybe one day, if the price is right, we might let them out.
oh my God, there's so many. Yeah, well, I'll have to have a lot of bloop beeping. A lot of, I forget what they call that. Beep,
Yeah,
because
bleepers.
everyone who knows you thinks you don't have a foul mouth. But the truth is, just kidding. So I,
Brian, I love working with you. And it's been absolutely brilliant because the story hour has made you and me, when we talk a lot anyway, we're constantly messaging each other on a friendship level. But the story hour has allowed us to talk pretty much every week for the last year, which has been brilliant, and I love it.
I do too. And I learned so much from you. And
Ditto.
I just adore working with you. I would like to take a moment. Our audience is not that big yet.
No.
But for those of you that have tuned in, we're very, very grateful. And what we want to bring is something new every week, a chance for people to learn and hopefully be inspired to create something by one of our guests. That to me is the highest compliment for what we do. If you're inspired by a guest that we've had and you're going to go off and do something new, then I think we've succeeded.
I completely agree. I mean, it's a win-win-win, isn't it, really? I just love
So
all of
we
it.
release episodes every Thursday and we'll continue to do so. Since I
Hmm.
do the technical, Alison is responsible for the release. And
Yeah.
then we are also on Clubhouse every Thursday at noon Pacific time, 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. We never know what the topic is going to be until like Monday. Like I just saw that we actually have our topic for this week.
We do.
So that's
And we have
great.
Trina Wood, so that's a win-win as well.
Yep. So the idea that we can, and in that particular case, it'll be past by the time this comes out, but we're actually talking about the differences between producing series in Europe and producing series in the United States and the job of
Mhm.
showrunners and what the writers' rooms look like. So if you're on Clubhouse, join the Clubhouse that's called In the Writers' Room. That's our Clubhouse. We have about 700 members now, I think. And if you're a member, you can start your own room to talk about anything that you would like to talk about that has to do with writing and creativity. And then we're on every Thursday for the writers room. So Allison, thank you for a great season one, and thank you for deciding that it actually was a season after 30 episodes. And I'll see you in the next season.
Yes, you will. Thank you, Brian. I love everything you do, and thank you
Uh,
for being the
Likewise,
director behind the scenes.
oh, thank you. I wish that, because whenever our little jaunty tune plays, we're always dancing behind the scenes, but that's not what gets recorded. So
No,
I'm gonna play the outro now, and you can just imagine because we do this, do 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 dance, Allison, do 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 do. So just imagine us dancing, and we'll see you next season. Bye
we
bye.
will. Thank you.